Hello everybody, welcome back to Inflation Decoded, my little crash course on inflation. Wolfgang, isn't real estate a perfect inflation hedge? That's the question I get asked time and again. I don't want to be a party pooper, nor do I want to appear overly critical, but there are some issues that you need to be aware of when you look at inflation in the context of real estate investments. And this video shows you 3 issues that you should think about. First, let's do an example. You consider buying a rental property as an investment against inflation. So, the mistake that many people do is that they look at the investment as one single piece. I recommend to decompose it into 3 parts and then look at them in different analysis. The first part is the structure, the house, the land, and that's pretty straightforward. That's a real asset, and hopefully that goes up with inflation. The second part is the financing, and depending on how your financing is structured, you might do well or you might do less well during inflation. Well, you can pay for it by using cash, that's one option. You can have a variable rate mortgage. Now keep in mind, variable rate mortgages will go up and down the interest rate with inflation, because inflation typically determines the interest rate. That's a red flag. Keep this in mind when you consider such a type of financing. And then you have long fixed rate mortgages. For example, in the US, we have 30-year mortgages, fixed rate mortgages. So for inflation purposes, the good thing is that your interest rate is fixed over the time of the mortgage. But there's another good thing. Because the mortgage is spread out over 30 years, the principal, the money you borrowed, will get inflated away with inflation. That's the nice thing about debt in an inflationary cycle. The people who have savings lose money because their savings have less purchasing power. The people who borrow money have to pay back less in real terms because inflation diminishes the real value of money. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But there's also a third point, a third component of your real estate transaction, which is the location. Keep in mind, you make a bet on a micro region. Let's say you buy a place in Massachusetts, in Boston, and then you're exposed to the local risk in Boston. So if the city does well and companies are hiring, that's great. But if a city goes down because of a recession or something, or some structural issues in a micro region, you might have a problem to find good tenants. So keep that in mind. You make also an investment in a location. You cannot just put your real estate into a bag like you do with a gold investment, a physical gold investment or Bitcoin, and wherever you live, you bring it with you. You have to keep in mind you are exposed to that region. And we have seen in Venezuela that you can get hit when markets get under pressure from high inflation. Some areas might be hard to find good tenants because of a very severe recession. So the first point is 3 components to your investment. Look at them with a professional in very great detail. Now the second issue are the cash expenses, and that's one thing that's often overlooked. It's very important. Just think about your own house. Let's say your house goes up 10%, another 10% due to inflation, another 10%, and you're excited. Well, keep your excitement limited, because this is paper money. It's not money you get, because you cannot just sell your house. You have to buy a new house, right? You have to live somewhere. So in reality, when your house goes up in value, that's paper money, but it has a nasty side effect. All your cash expenses are typically linked to inflation and to the price of your house. So for example, real estate taxes are typically calculated on basis of your real estate. So if it's a house, it's a certain percentage. If the house price goes up, your real estate taxes go up. And this is cash. That's money that goes away. It's not paper money like the value of your house that goes up and down. Insurance, homeowner association fees. If you live in a gated community or in an apartment complex, maintenance, repairs, transaction fees, utilities, all these costs are linked in a direct or indirect way to inflation. And these are cash expenses. You have to come up with the cash to pay these expenses. And you cannot use the cash of your house going up in value. That's paper money. You hope one day you will cash in, but every year these expenses come. There's another issue I want to make you aware of. The third issue is government interventions. You have to keep in mind, our experience in inflation is that governments become hyperactive, simply because their voters will complain. And with real estate, there's an issue. There are less landlords than renters. And therefore, the renters are a big group for the next election. So very often you see that governments lean to the renters during times of high inflation. What does that mean? They might introduce rent control. If you have a rental property, that's an issue. They might put additional taxes on you, or in some cases they might even, particularly with left-wing governments, they might even think of taking your property away and confiscate it. Particularly if you are a big investor. That could happen. Now you would think this is something I have not to worry about. Maybe in South America that's an issue. Confiscations, that topic was discussed in Germany, and it was brought up by a political group not too long ago in the context of big real estate investors. So this is an issue you have to keep in mind. The next one is inflation might get out of control. Now, when inflation gets totally out of control, your real estate might be a problem for you. Let's say your own house. You want to move away. Maybe you even want to move into another country because your own country is going through a long period of distress. You cannot just bring your house with you. There might not be a market for it at the moment, so you cannot cash in. It's not liquid. Keep this in mind. Many people who left high inflation countries were stuck with their real estate in the home country. Selection of risk is also an important issue. You have to be aware that you're making a big concentrated investment. You cannot diversify your real estate investments over 50 or 60 properties like you do with your stock portfolio. It's typically one or two for most people. And therefore, you have to make sure that the quality is good, there are no issues that you oversee, that you forgot, flooding, storms with climate change, that's a thing that's coming up. I see more and more articles on this topic. So, in conclusion, real estate, I hope you saw it's not a perfect inflation hedge, but there are no perfect inflation hedges. Diversification is always key when we talk about addressing inflation. I hope that was helpful. Please join my network by subscribing to my channel and shoot any questions you have or suggestions for next video. Thank you very much. Again, this is for informational purposes and it's a very simplified summary of a very complex topic. Thank you very much.